Hello, and welcome to UDL in 15 Minutes, where educators discuss their experiences with UDL. I'm Louie Lord Nelson, UDL author and leader. Today, I'm talking with Carla Ferla, head teacher at Peareswood Primary School, and Julie Carson, director of education at Woodland Academy Trust. Carla and Julie are going to share their personal journeys with UDL. Welcome, Carla and Julie.
Oh, thank you so much for having us. We're really looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, thank you, Louie. Yeah, we're looking forward to sharing our journey with you.
Thank you both for being here. So, can you share a bit about yourselves as educators? And go ahead and say your name first so that listeners can attach your name to your voice.
Absolutely. I'm Julie. I've been an educator for 30 years. I started out as a classroom teacher, then moved into leadership roles. I was a head teacher for 13 years, which was just an amazing job. Then an executive head teacher, which means that I was over more than one school. And I've been in my current role as Director of Education for 6 years. And what Director of Education means here is because we're an academy trust, we're a group of schools that work together. I've been the strategic lead for all things education across our 5 schools. And I've really particularly worked in communities which are wonderfully diverse, and I'm really passionate about that and providing support for them.
Excellent. Thank you, Julie. And what about you, Carla?
Hi, Louie. So I'm Carla. I've been in education for 27 years. I've worked predominantly in different London local authorities, very similar to Julie, actually. You know, started off as a classroom teacher and then moved into leadership roles. I've been at Peareswood for almost 10 years now. And I started off as a deputy head a teacher responsible for inclusion, which is really important in terms of our kind of the communities that we serve, you know, at Peareswood and within the Woodland Academy Trust. And I have been head teacher, a proud head teacher of Peareswood Primary for 8 years now.
Excellent. All right. As promised, you're both going to share your personal journeys with UDL because I think those journeys are going to resonate with so many people. Julie, you talk about your deep connection with curriculum as the reason UDL resonated with you. And I think it'd be really helpful to talk about what you mean when you say curriculum. So, can you describe that first?
Yes, and that is really important because so many people have different views as to what curriculum is.
Mm-hmm.
So when I talk about curriculum, I'm not just talking about the subjects or the schemes of work. I mean the full learning journey that we design for our children. And for me, curriculum is about 3 things in particular that are woven together. So first of all, we're always thinking about what do we want our children to learn? So that's knowledge, vocabulary, concepts, skills, it's the content, but also the purpose behind it. Why are we doing this? Why are we teaching this? Why now? Why does it matter for this community in particular and for the children that we're serving? The next thing I think about is how we help them learn it. And that's where the pedagogy really comes in. So our teaching approaches, the scaffolding, modelling, practice, use of tools, and also our use of technology. So it's thinking about the methods we use to make the content accessible. And then finally, it's about how children show us what they know. And assessment is such a strong part of the curriculum. You know, how pupils express their understanding, their writing, their speaking, their creating, performing, explaining, all of those different ways you'll sit within curriculum design. So when I say I have a deep connection to the curriculum, what I mean is I'm always thinking about who is it designed for, who might struggle to access it, what barriers might exist, and how can we remove those barriers from the outset rather than bolting on support later.
Absolutely. As I was listening to your 3 different pieces, I was thinking, we have lovely alignment with how UDL talks about curriculum, the goals, methods, materials, and assessments. Absolutely wonderful. So, talk about the connections you were making between curriculum and UDL, which is what I was just talking about. But why did you see UDL as a driver to develop stronger curriculum?
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that connection already, isn't it? I mean, for us, UDL was so natural, that connection between curriculum and UDL, because what it really did was gave us a way to design the curriculum that works for more children right from the start, rather than adapting it afterwards. I think in the past, what we were doing, and which wasn't successful or as successful for all of our pupils, was we built the curriculum first. And then after that, we thought about, adaptations or differentiation or interventions where pupils struggled. And UDL really challenged that process of thinking and made me think, well, if our classrooms are so diverse, why are we going to design learning in just one way and one way only? So the connection I saw was quite simple, or it was simple in my brain when it made that connection. Um, you know, Curriculum is what we teach, but UDL shapes how it's designed so that absolutely everyone can access it. And it's strengthened our curriculum in three main ways. So we're really clear on what that core learning is. What does every child need to know and understand? And when you know what it is that they need to know and understand, then you can be flexible about how the pupils get there. Then what it really did was help us remove barriers earlier. So we started thinking about, vocabulary load or reading demands of our different stages of education or our abilities within the classroom, attention and confidence. And what we did was we built in supports from the outset and stopped doing it as an afterthought. And then the thing for me, and this is the thing that I particularly love seeing when I go into our schools, is it broadened how the pupils could show their learning. Understanding didn't have to come through just that one format. We've seen so many times people writing up science experiments. That's not telling me whether a child can understand the scientific concepts. It's telling me whether a child can write. So, by being able to show their learning in different ways, so writing, videos, creating, explaining, everything has become valid for our pupils. And I think the key for us is that we never saw UDL as an add-on or a SEND strategy, a special educational needs strategy. It was about designing our curriculum correctly, which made it inclusive, engaging, and really just so ambitious for our children, because more children can succeed with it.
There's so much in there. What I want to go back to is that, Julie, you were nailing there in the beginning, saying that you really had to understand the core learning, what every child needs to know and understand, and then moving from there. And that is such a key component of UDL that for somebody who's been doing this for 18 years, that unfortunately some people skip over. They think, oh, we can just go to the guidelines. We can just start using engagement, representation, action, expression, which you can, but it won't be as effective unless you know what you're working toward. And that's then, like you said, the core learning. So I really appreciate you articulating that, but then also laying out everything so specifically. And it's really obvious that you talk a lot about UDL to other people because you're really clear about it.
I think people are probably fed up of me talking about UDL to them. I'm an absolute passionate person about it.
Absolutely. Well, it comes out clear as a bell. So, Carla, you talked about the needs of the learners in your area as the driving force for UDL. So, what kind of needs were you seeing?
Well, just to give a little bit of context around the school, so we're positioned within an area of high deprivation. About 30% of our children identified with special educational needs. So some of those needs are around very similar to many schools, like communication, language, attention and regulation challenges. It might be even linked to confidence. Somebody's working memory or anxiety, just anxiety about getting things wrong. But this also sat alongside, there's children where, there's additional vulnerabilities that they don't have a formal diagnosis, but actually as, the key kind of adults in the school, we can identify this. And what we were seeing previously was, children disengaged in their learning and absolutely school life in general. And the engagement just wasn't there in, the majority of lessons. Some children, what we could see, the child who maybe masking their disengagement, the child who sits at the front of the class with their hands up saying to teacher, pick me, but actually that's just a way of saying, please don't pick me. Whilst others presented differently, maybe that would be different in terms of maybe dysregulated behaviours. And if I just think about, there's many children that come to mind, but there's one child in particular. And, when we do talk about UDL, I often share this child because it's just the transformation that we're actually, what we've seen. The child is still in our school. where they were, on a daily basis, they were dysregulated. They just wouldn't apply themselves, and they removed themselves from kind of school life. And this was similar to, quite a few children on different kind of levels. And we know that dysregulation behaviours, it's a way of child kind of communicating to school adults that, I don't feel safe, and the learning isn't presented in a way that I can access, and therefore do I actually kind of belong. So learning wasn't accessible for all of our children. And, in hindsight, looking back, hindsight's always, a great thing. The plan for variability, it hadn't been kind of thought through. And that realization, it became, absolute kind of key driver for us to, explore and really kind of deeply, rethink how we design learning, right from the beginning.
That's wonderful. So there are, okay, so many layers here too. First of all, I really appreciate, Carla, that you brought up the example of the child sitting in the front row and putting their hands up. That's not a guaranteed symbol of engagement. But so many places literally around the world that's the action that would be ticked off a list to say, oh,
Yeah,
that child is engaged. And your point is
yeah,
so well made that hand up can just be performative.
absolutely.
Yeah, it doesn't really mean that they're connected with the learning. They might be connected with attention seeking, or they might be just connecting with, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do to look like a student. And that's the reason why we have to have all of these different ways to connect with our learners and to engage them. So I really appreciate that. And then also pointing out that when we have these learners who have those dysregulated behaviors, and that is a form of communication.
Yeah.
Behavior is communication.
Mm.
And then by providing the different ways, methods, materials, all these things for that child to be able to demonstrate engagement, now they can find other ways to communicate. So
Yeah.
that's what I was hearing you say.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, oh, perfect, perfect, perfect. So, what kind of good work was already going on at Peareswood? Because this is the other thing that we hear when we bring UDL to an environment. People are like, oh, we're already doing this, and then maybe they'll stop. But it sounds like you all had good things going on, but then decided to keep going. So, first, what was already going on that allowed UDL to take hold?
Okay, so at Pears, and this is absolutely linked to the community that we serve, and actually we in terms of even the staffing, training, everything else, there was so much investment around inclusion and how we make sure that all children belong. It was and it remains a strong culture of inclusion at Peareswood. The staff here, we care deeply about the children, about removing those barriers. And the same high expectations were absolutely there, and especially for our children, our most vulnerable children, let's say, and to include them in the whole kind of learning experience, making sure they're not separate. But there was varying successes in terms of that. But we also worked closely, and we still do, partnerships, which is so important and key for, those partnerships with the parents and the carers. We spend a lot of time in communication with outside professionals. Our staff are incredibly, and they were as well, solution focused and thinking outside the box. So thinking about one particular child, maybe, a class teacher thinking about a child in their class, okay, this isn't working, what else can we do? And reaching out to members of leadership team, reaching out to their year group partner, then, pulling in professionals around that. Staff as well, they were proactive in saying, well, I work with this child for an intervention. I've noticed this is happening, a slight kind of change in how they access. I feel as though that I would benefit from additional professional development. I found this professional development. Please, can I attend? So there was so much going on, Louis. It's not as though that, previously there was tumbleweed and there was nothing. Inclusion was always the priority for the school, and that continues.
Yeah, that's a beautiful base. And I would completely agree with you based on, again, what I've seen is that when we have inclusion as the base and that's the driver, that just sets it up so beautifully. So when you and your school community heard about UDL, did you immediately say, this is it? Or was it a slow discovery?
Well, obviously, Julie presented this, and she's so passionate and excited. It's difficult to say no, but it was definitely the way it was presented. But it was more of a shift in our thinking, because actually the foundations of UDL, they were already there, and we were doing elements of the work, but probably we just weren't like fully aware of it. And I think with UDL, it absolutely enabled us to maybe unpick practice, definitely looking at alignment against the three principles, and then approach it with greater depth and clarity and intention. So that's what it was. We looked at what we were currently doing, and we were doing a lot, but it was just about being more strategic around it. So I think when it was presented and we were sharing with our community and our staff school teams, people could make those connections and those commonalities across. But it just gave us more of that kind of language and structure to articulate what we already believed. And so in parts it was a bit of a light bulb moment, and a light bulb moment as in, well, we are doing elements of this, and it's just about, what are the next steps, and thinking more deeply around it. And I think with anything that you bring in, it gives you a time to reflect, doesn't it? Because when you're in the moment and you are, on a day-to-day in the busy life of a school, sometimes you're not, it's difficult to really unpick what you are doing and what things you need to change. But this enabled us to maybe stop and reflect, and absolutely just to sharpen our focus. That's what it did. But I think the whole buy-in with everyone, school community and everyone that involves, because we were doing elements unintentionally, the whole kind of movement and the whole kind of direction and development, it wasn't like a brand new strategy that teachers were thinking, oh, this is going to add to our workload. It absolutely wasn't. It was just fine tuning and sharpening the focus in terms of our pedagogical approach.
Absolutely. Oh, wonderful. So you've talked about engagement as a key part of connecting learners with learning. So what are some examples of that which you think are directly related to UDL?
Well, first of all, I just want to say, I mean, the engagement of our children in their learning, with school life, that's been significant, and that's what we see across, and we see that right from starting from our nursery, so the younger children, years, age 3 and 4, right up to our children at the top end of the school. And the engagement, for us is about making sure that you're giving pupils that meaningful reasons to learn, and ways to connect with the content and school life. I keep coming back to school life. It's not just what happens in the lessons. It's everything that we provide as a school. So we've built in more opportunities of choice within tasks. So pupils might choose how they're going to present. Their understanding. So that can be, as we know, like, oral explanation, maybe visual representation. And we do use our digital tools around that to support. But we've also looked at how we can really, enhance and foster that independence. So children are less reliant because of the confidence that they're gaining. They're less reliant on school adults. So we've done that through that intentional design, but that scaffolding, and providing children with those clear routines. As an adult, that's how I work best. As adults, we love a routine, don't we? And it's the same for children as well. And and even myself, visual supports. I mean, I love a visual, and it's those predictable structures, because that reduces anxieties for children as well. That's how they feel safe. And that's where, I think in the early years, we are, as practitioners, it's all about, children, taking risks. And sometimes that can get lost as children move further up the school. But with everything that we're putting in place, children are taking those risks in their learning. And technology has also supported us with this. We use different tools that children, they can record ideas verbally or the text to speech, and they access the learning different in formats. We've even now looked at our learning environments, so creating those flexible spaces for the children, and absolutely mindful of that cognitive overload for our children. But the most significant impact for us at Peareswood, and for our children, is teachers approaching that lesson design through the lens of accessibility, and that's right from the onset. And that has made a huge difference in terms of, the sense of belonging, engagement, that kind of, empowerment of the children. And, just thinking about the child I mentioned earlier, I mean, and who is, as I said, is still here. So this is, we see this on a day-to-day basis from this child. They are accessing the learning, dysregulated behaviours at an absolute kind of minimum. The curriculum is there for them to enjoy. And also, they're now, in terms of academic outcomes, they're now working at that expected level. And what we see with this child, and lots, it's not just about this child, but, if I do this kind of case study around one particular child, we see that learner agency, and that starts with accessibility, isn't it? If a child can access the whole school environment, they're learning, and it's accessible, then that's when you see that learner agency. And absolutely, if you walk through the school, you can see that.
Absolutely. A huge takeaway from what you've shared, Carla, and then also what you were sharing, Julie, is that the setup of having an environment where educators are primed for inclusion. They're primed and they've been supported by school leadership and structures within the environment that they can actually create an inclusive environment is a great initial step. When people are thinking, well, we want to bring UDL into our building, we want to bring it into our collection, our community, then that's a wonderful example of a way to start. And then what you were just articulating, Carla, is it's the top row of the UDL guidelines, right? Access. So my nickname for that is the welcome mat. So if we focus on welcoming interest and identities and perception and interaction and just those guidelines and then the considerations within them, that's a perfect place to start, because it does, like you said, it meets the needs of all learners. And the expectation is that all learners are brought in and that they will be included. And so it's just a lovely way to express for anyone who's saying, how do we get started with this? Well, listen to Julie and Carla talk about this, and I think you'll get some great ideas. I know we are well into this, so listeners have been, they're just going to be, oh, this is beyond 15 minutes, and that's okay. I want to loop back, Julie, because like Carla said, you brought such enthusiasm about UDL, and to get people started off, do you remember what your primary message was when you first introduced UDL and you were thinking, okay, I just want to have this be a great way to start. I want people to really hook into this. Do you remember what your intent was around that first? I don't even know if it was a training or if it was an email or a communication.
Yeah, it was a training actually. So I think I've been visiting schools and we've been looking about our pedagogy and our tech approach, and we knew it wasn't quite right, and we were a little bit stuck. And it very much, once we discovered UDL and realised kind of the power behind it and how we could link it to curriculum, the message was very much around that why. That's what we're starting with. What's our core purpose? What's our moral purpose actually for the communities that we serve? Well, it's to make sure, our mission is ignite the spark, reveal the champion. And if we weren't delivering things in the right way, we weren't igniting any sparks, and we certainly weren't igniting the sparks of everyone. So it was very much linking to look at what this could do, how that links to what our mission is for our communities, and then let's have a play and let's see what we can find out. So yeah, it was just really linking back to that why and making sure that we were meeting all needs.
Yeah. Yes. And the other thing that you added, so the why, and then let's have a play. You
Yes.
sent a really clear communication of saying, let's just work with this. Let's be iterative. Let's try and then examine. So beautiful. Oh, such beautiful examples. Oh my gosh. Okay. I could keep going, but I've already not held us to our 15 minutes, but that's okay. Listeners are going to be very excited about this. Oh my gosh. So I want to thank you both for being on UDL in 15 minutes. Thank you for taking this time. Everyone should know we've spent months trying to find a time where we could connect because Julie and Carla are doing such wonderful things. And so just finding this time to reach out across the pond and find a common time. So thank you for sticking with me and being a guest.
Okay, thank you so much for having me, Huz. We've really enjoyed talking to you and sharing our journey.
Yeah, thank you, Louie. And thank you for inviting us. And it has been really lovely to share what we're doing at Peareswood.
Wonderful. Thank you. So for those listening to this podcast, you can find supplemental materials like an image montage with closed captioning, that montage with audio descriptions, a transcript, and an associated blog at my website, which is the udlapproach.com/podcasts. And finally, if you have a story to share about UDL implementation for UDL in 15 minutes, you can contact me through the udlapproach.com. And thanks to everyone for your work in revolutionizing education through UDL and making it our goal to build learner agency.